Right, good evening everybody. It is 7:01, so we do need to start this meeting. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council on May 10th, 2022, opening at 7:01 p.m. We're wearing masks only by choice tonight. The gallery is open once more, but our seating is still distanced. Deputations are now live and public question time has been reinstated. I particularly welcome all those who are watching this meeting from home and those who have joined us in the gallery outside. Please remain silent and stand for the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the original custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the Cultural Authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. We also consider in our thoughts all those currently affected by war, especially in the Ukraine. Finally, we seek understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in, or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. Please be patient and respectful of each other, especially with these operational conditions tonight. It is important that all views of the elected members are heard. I will continue to use the auto queuing system. So you press your button on your microphone to raise your hand and do not speak until I have acknowledged you. Remember also to turn off your microphone as soon as you finish speaking. Please turn off your mobile phone or place it on silent during the meeting so that we can focus on the debate without interruption. We have no apologies. We have no leave of absence. I'll just seek if there is anyone who wishes to declare an interest. Councillor Piggott.
Yes. Madam Mayor, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest on item 11.1 on the basis that my wife has a senior management role at Pembroke School. I will absent myself from the debate.
Thank you, Councillor Piggott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, with 11.1, I want to declare that I'm an old scholar and of Pembroke School and a life member of the Old Scholars Association, but I will still remain for the debate and participate in the vote.
Thank you. And Councillor Henschke?
Yes, regarding 11.1, I am an old scholar of Pembroke and I will remain for the debate.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor, you didn't, it's not on there, sorry, now it is.
Yes, I'd like to, there's a deputation tonight about a barking dog. And there might be a perceived conflict of interest given that I'm on the Dog and Cat Management Board, but I don't see it as an interest because...
I'll interrupt you because that deputation is no longer
I have
happening.
no conflicts.
That's right. So therefore you have no conflict. Sorry for interrupting, but I thought it would just make it easier. Okay. I haven't got around to announcing the changes. Right, we have now... Lost my second page. Confirmation of minutes. Thank you, Councillor Turnbull. Seconded, Councillor Dawes. All those in favour? Against? Carried. No adjourned business. No public question time that's been presented to me. Presentations, no, but we do have two deputations. There's an apology from Mr Gerard Hughes, who's unable to be here tonight because of a last-minute event. But we do have two other deputations this evening. One is from a Mr John Walsh, both on the Haslam Oval issue, and the other one is Ms Anne Barriolo has been replaced or has requested that Mr Greg Vincent speak on her behalf. So that's a slight change. So I'll invite Mr John Walsh to come forward first. And Mr Walsh, if you could just say what suburb you live in, your name and what suburb you live in before you speak. And you will get a warning bell at 4 minutes and a final bell at 5 minutes. And then if you'd remain there for questions to be asked of you.
Lovely. Does this work? Yep. Yes. Mayor, councillors, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you.
Say your name and suburb, please.
Yeah, my name is John Walsh. I'm a retired academic from the University of Adelaide. I'm a local. I live in Beulah Park in Osborne Avenue. I oppose the sale of our community land to Pembroke School and have previously provided written comment as part of the council's community engagement process. From my perspective, the community has spoken and the results of the consultation are decisive, with over 60% of respondents opposed to the community land title revocation. I would ask that council acknowledge and respect this outcome, and I'm taking up the opportunity granted this evening to reiterate my position and the position of more than 100 respondents to the survey. The Oval, as you know, is located in the middle of a densely populated residential area, and I'm absolutely clear that further development of the school will have a negative impact on residential lifestyle, particularly by increasing the traffic and parking problems which already exist, and which I believe perhaps the second deputation may address in more detail. I'm not directly involved in the immediacy of those issues, but I have a long and positive experience with Haslam Oval, as well as Olympic Oval across the road. I played cricket on Haslam Oval for Scotch College staff back in 1981 versus Pembroke staff. I could stretch the point and tell you I scored the winning runs. I didn't, I scored a duck. I've now lived in Beulah Park for more than 20 years, and during all of those years I've been a jogger, more recently a shuffler. I run from home in Osborne Avenue, up Beulah Road and along Gers Road, and then around Olympic Oval. Sometimes I use Dunstan Avenue, and on occasions when I think nobody's looking, I might even do a few laps inside Haslam. My daughter tells me I'm living on the edge. I love the open green space, and I love sharing it with the local community of which I'm part. As a former school teacher, I rejoice in seeing the Pembroke students engage in phys ed classes on Haslam, on the tennis courts, on the netball courts, and on Olympic Oval. It's a joy, and long may it last. My concern is that the wonderful green open space that we know as Haslam, the trees, the Oval itself, and this environment more broadly, an environment that our local community currently enjoys, may be lost, that it won't last. I'm particularly concerned about the trees, the bushes, the grass, the birds and insects that might be lost. I'm acutely concerned about the stand of gums on the western edge of the Oval. I counted 27 of those, some of which will be as old as the Oval itself, which was planted in 1929. So some of those trees are approaching their 100th birthday. They are irreplaceable. Any argument which suggests otherwise has no merit. I acknowledge the Kaurna people as the first owners of this land. I acknowledge Pembroke as the current owners of Haslam Oval and all of the houses on the western side of Dunstan Avenue. I would prefer that Pembroke regards itself as the custodian of the land, and with this custodianship comes responsibilities. I believe that the first and most important responsibility is to preserve this land, not to knock down the trees and knock down the houses which stand on it. This will be an inevitable outcome of any redevelopment. It is vital that Pembroke, as an important educator of those who will lead our community, our country, our planet in the future, that it embraces its role as the custodian of this precious natural environment. I would urge Pembroke to consider how to ensure that these trees are protected so that they in turn will go on protecting us and the wildlife which inhabits them for another 100 years and more. Without our protection, this natural habitat will disappear, and so too the life of those whose very existence depends upon it. On the other side of the Oval, a redevelopment will result in the bulldozing of 13 examples of post-World War I architecture. These have been family homes for close to 100 years, where family and community history, totaling more than 1,000 years, has been created. This is in danger of disappearing. Now, we can treat this issue of this particular redevelopment as separate from and not related to broader issues of shrinking canopy, of disappearing green space, of threatening bird life, wildlife. Or, as I would suggest, we can regard them as one and the same thing. Perhaps even more front and centre is the issue of climate change, climate crisis. This instance of redevelopment proposal is totally related to these issues. It is not independent of them. I support the report and the recommendation that Council will refuse Pembroke the opportunity to increase its footprint. It is unsupported, it is unwelcome, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to it.
Right. Councillor Davis, you were first, although you're not on the machine here.
Can you tell me about what the engagement process that you've had from Pembroke School and what communication you've had with them?
Personally,
Well, yeah, and the community. What's been the engagement process from Pembroke School?
as I understand it, Pembroke...
Could you...
Sorry. As I understand it, I'm not speaking as an expert here, there are more experts about this, I'm just a local resident. As I understand it, Pembroke door-knocked 124, I believe, local houses. That didn't include mine because I was too far away, according to Pembroke. But it did include the house where my daughter was renting at the time. And so it was through that that I understood what was going on and then made further representation. But you'd have to ask people more expert than me about the exact consultation process that Pembroke has engaged in.
Councillor Hubel, could you just turn your microphone off, Councillor Davey? Thank you.
Oh.
Now, there was a bit of a muddle to start with, so just if you mind turning it off. I've got you written down in the order that you actually had your hand up.
So can I just clarify, do we speak, do we just put our hands up?
No, use the microphone, but there was just a bit of a buzz at the beginning. So,
It's my fault.
It was Councillor Davis's fault.
we lost the first, so we're back on track. I'll just call you up as you're required. So, Councillor Hubel, you're next.
Mr Walsh, hi. Thank you for coming in tonight. We actually share something together. I've also scored a duck on Haslam Oval. Touching on something you brought up, that you do cheeky little laps of Haslam from time to time. I did want to ask, as a local who obviously running by it fairly regularly, you would see it, you know, I tend to see it when I'm going past it during peak times, and I don't tend to see it quieter times of the day, morning, evening, that sort of thing. Is the practice of people sneaking onto the Oval and casually using it informally, is that something that's fairly widespread, or is that quite rare?
No, it's quite rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So generally people aren't on it unless they're students
I
of the
think
school.
people understand that it's Pembroke land and don't use it. I think I used it once to my disadvantage when I was locked in and then had to work out how to get out. But it's not like across the road where we do all use and all share, and that sharing is wonderful. The sharing of Olympic Oval and that relationship between Council and Pembroke is a fine relationship for community involvement in open space. I would love to be able to use Haslam, but I understand it's not mine, it's the school's, and I don't go there.
So would you see the benefit of it, you know, I mean, referring to it as open space, it certainly is open in terms of an aesthetic and I guess an environmental issue, it is open space, but the benefit is not, I guess what I'm saying is, does the fact that you're not able to be on the land detract from it in terms of it being a valuable piece of open space?
I regard it as
very awkward question. I acknowledge, and I'm sorry.
And I think I understand. I think what you're wanting me to talk about, and I think for me, it is the fact that I can see this land. It is open. I see the kids playing on it. I see the cricket going on there on the weekends. There's footy on the weekends. It's not closed, and in future, I'll give a quick slap to Pembroke here. We don't know what Pembroke are proposing, and therefore it invites us to fear the worst. It invites us to fear walls, which a new gym will involve, and therefore that openness and that visibility of that open space, which is what I'm talking about, will be lost.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for coming along tonight, John. My question was going to be along the lines of Councillor Hubel's in terms of what use the local community actually are able to make of the Oval. But perhaps, and you have mentioned Kensington Park Oval at Olympic.
No, sorry, Olympic Oval. Yes,
You mentioned,
yes, Olympic Oval.
That as a good example
Yes.
of how the community shares a community facility excellently. Can you elaborate a bit more about that? Because I know that land is leased to Pembroke, and to my mind it works superbly as a joint open space with ovals, barbecue facilities. Well, no, yes, there are barbecue facilities, and just dog walkers, and everybody share it.
Yeah.
And it really benefits everybody.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
I think the Olympic Oval is a wonderful example of how a community and a school and a council can all work together. I'm hugely grateful to Pembroke because I understand that they pay for its upkeep, and that oval is like a carpet. So the man who looks after the oval, I say hello to him 3 days a week, but I never know his name. He tends to it as if it is his own little piece of land, and he's a delightful character. The land is wonderful. We all benefit from it. It's open to us. It's in pristine condition, and apart from the occasional dog walker who doesn't do the right thing, we all love it. And so I don't know whether Haslam could be like that. I'm not expecting that. What I would want is that it continues in the way that it's open and I can view it as a community member.
Councillor Cornish.
Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.
In light of that, would you be, as a resident, okay with a long-term lease over these parcels of land to Pembroke rather than revocating its community use title and then us converting it into operational and then possibly selling it to them so they can convert it into an open field for sport? Would you be okay with us leasing it on a long-term basis under the Act, still retaining it as community land, but leasing it to them on an exclusive basis?
Off the top of my head, without knowing much about how that all works, yes, until it means that Pembroke then have the right to redevelop that land without consulting us, the community. I would be against that, and if a long-term lease doesn't allow them to do that, then go ahead and lease it. The issue around, for me, the issue around the ownership of the easement isn't particularly important. For me, the important thing is the fear of that land being lost to private hands to develop it in a way which suits its needs rather than the wishes and desires of the community.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you.
Yeah. No one claps me that much.
I play them.
Yeah. Yeah, so do I. If Pembroke actually released what their master plan would be and then committed to that, do you think the residents would be more likely to agree to releasing the community land?
Personally, no, but that's personal. I think the footprint that Pembroke have on the land, on the suburb at the moment, is large enough, and any bigger footprint will be detrimental to the environment. So, on a personal note, I would not be happy with redevelopment of the land.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walsh, for coming in and answering so many questions.
My pleasure.
And your deputation.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Now I invite Mr. Greg Vincent to come forward. And again, Mr. Vincent, if you could just state your name and your suburb where you live, and then you can begin, and you have a warning bell at 4 minutes and a second bell at 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. My name's Greg Vincent. I am a resident of Gers Road, Beulah Park. I live directly opposite Haslam Oval and enjoy views across the Oval on a regular basis. I do acknowledge that it is private land. It's owned by Pembroke in the main. Of course, we're here to actually talk about some of that tonight. Thank you, Mayor, elected members, staff. I am here tonight to make a deputation on the Haslam Oval, Dunstan Oval proposed community land revocation drainage easement. Can I start by thanking Council? We'd like to thank you personally and as a community for providing us extra time within which to actually make informed comment on the revocation process. So thank you for acceding to that process. We'd also like to thank you for engaging with and agreeing to undertake a traffic and parking study of the area. Something that's very important, long overdue, and a necessity in informing this council on what needs to happen in the future. And I say in the future. I'd like to thank Pembroke. In relation to a question earlier tonight, Pembroke have taken the opportunity to go and consult with the community. Consult, engage, let's choose the right words here. They've listened and taken comments back through their consultants. What they do with those comments is yet to be seen. But thank you, Pembroke, for actually taking the first step, and hopefully the first step of many, in engaging with the community to find out how to actually address community concerns and potentially result in the redevelopment of their precinct in an instructed and an informed way that will result in community support, because that ultimately will be what is required. I do, however, want to make some comments in support of the recommendation that you do have before you. That recommendation, of course, is not to proceed with the revocation of the community land parcels at this stage, and as John most eloquently spoke, is based on the community reaction and the numerous, in excess of 60% of the community that do not support the revocation of that community land. And if I might personally add to that, at this stage, okay? At this stage, and based on the survey that was actually undertaken. The survey was very restricted in terms of the information that it actually sought from the community. So the community actually provided information in the best way in which it knew how to actually expand upon their reasons on their understanding of what was happening. Firstly, I'd like to, in respect to the recommendation 4 in your agenda, which is to negotiate an easement. Now, I've got a bit of concern about the wording of that portion of the recommendation, which states authorises the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate appropriate access. Now, negotiate, to me, means trade-off. It means coming, talking with Pembroke, being the owners of the land, and trading off something. Now, at this stage, the community doesn't know what those trade-offs would be. To me, it is not for the Chief Executive Officer to negotiate the easement over the drainage, but for the community to actually understand that the council has explored every opportunity that it has at its disposal to actually seek an easement, if that's required, over the drainage. Let's note that the drainage that runs under Haslam Oval forms part of the Stonyfell Creek natural drainage system. It's a creek. It's actually been undergrounded over time, but it forms part of a creek. Now, I'm conscious of time here, and I'm not going to run out of time very quickly. In my opinion, that should be reworded, and that the council staff should actually explore whether it is more appropriate, one, to construct infrastructure elsewhere, or whether or not there is actually a legal right, whether that be implied easement, whether it be through adverse possession, The drainage has been there for a long, long time, been used by the community for excessive time by virtue of the drainage running underneath there, and so have all legal opportunities been explored for this council to actually claim its easement rights and not have to negotiate them. Secondly, the matter of probity. I think there's a clear indication in the report that Pembroke was either made aware or was aware of the outcome of the community consultation prior to this report being made available to the public. It's stated in the report itself. Thirdly, the validity of the survey results. And I've got a couple of pages here, and if it was at the liberty of the council, I'd like to actually speak to a little bit of the probity of the survey results, which might take another couple of minutes.
Those who approve the extension of time, please indicate. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members.
Wait, what was the vote?
We're just voting to allow them to speak for 2 more minutes. Yes. Sorry, I didn't say carried. It was the majority.
Thank you, members. The report makes the statement that the community sentiment on the proposed Pembroke School Master Plan has been distorted the engagement process for the proposal to revoke the land parcels. That the respondents appear to have misunderstood the purpose of this engagement process. I, for one, can tell you that the respondents have not misunderstood the process. They are clear, they are informed, and they are engaged with the process. Purely because there's been reference to the Pembroke Master Plan does not mean that this community does not know what they're talking about. They fully understand what the process is, they understand where it sits at the moment. The school has provided a clear purpose for the need to seek the revocation of that community land. The school has actively sought the revocation of the land, otherwise you would not be going through this process, and they've actively sought it for a specific purpose. If not for the request from Pembroke and their long-term vision, the revocation process would not have proceeded to consultation itself. The summary on page 11 of the consultation report presents, in my opinion, a biased opinion and not balanced position expected in a council report. The report makes the statement that the proposal to revoke community land status is not supported by respondents to this based on the inclusion of all the responses. Well, hold on. All of those responses are valid. Claims that any of them would be invalid, which is stated in your report, is a falsity. In response, I submit the respondents and the residents and the ratepayers surrounding the land need to be considered in holistic. The summary makes no reference to the intent of the respondents who said yes, and makes no insinuations behind the motives of those who supported the revocation. A clear one-sided representation within the report itself. On that basis alone, those specific comments should be ignored. This is my opinion that it represents an inherent bias of the reporting of the summary of the results, notwithstanding the recommendation.
That's your 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Davis.
So, can I just clarify, do you not accept the report and the recommendation from council saying that it's biased, in which case we should go and redo this report?
No, that's not what I said at all. Thank you. What I actually said, excuse me, was that we support the recommendation not to revoke the land, and that was in the first statement of my deputation tonight.
Yeah, so what's wrong
What I have then gone on to say is, in the inherent basis of the way in which this report is structured, it has a potential to actually lead members in an alternate recommendation by virtue of saying that it's not 60% of the community that actually opposes this, but if you exclude those members of the community who made a statement about the Pembroke Master Plan, then it is a lot less and it's more like a 50-50 area. This report did not go on to actually make any statement to the same effect for those who said yes to the revocation process, and the understanding that those people who said yes may well have been members of Pembroke who were actively sought their engagement through Pembroke. It is that basis that I am talking about, and if you read the report as it is structured, there is no reference to any insinuation from the yes vote, but there's a reference to the insinuations through the no vote. Does that not make sense?
No. But all I heard from that is you don't accept the report and we should do it again.
No, not at all.
So you're happy with the report? It's all good?
I don't accept the fact that if this report leads this council to vote against the recommendation...
Okay.
Okay.
I just feel...
If this report...
Can I say this? You either think the report is good and you're happy with the recommendation, or you think the report is bad and we should do it again.
No.
Now, I don't...
The report's not black and white like
If
that.
the report says that we shouldn't accept the community revocation, like if the council says we shouldn't accept the community reservation, then you're happy with the report. But the council chooses not to accept it, then you're not happy with the report. I just think you've got to... My thing is, do you think that this report is good enough for this council to accept, or do you think that we should go out again to consultation?
I think that the outcome of the consultation process and the conclusions and recommendation of the report are sound and should be supported by this council. What I'm saying is that there is an inherent element of the report that tries to lead the council in an alternate recommendation. If I can read, let me read a particular page.
One person at a time, please.
Well, it will if I was able to read my whole speech, but that's fine.
Okay, I'll just go to the next person who's asked to speak, to ask you a question. That's Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Mr Vincent, for coming in tonight. And I guess my question is on this issue, and it is on the suggestion in the council report that there was a percentage of the no respondents that cited, I guess, ambiguity with Pembroke's intentions as a cause for them voting no, and that there was a potential that had the school made it very clear what they were intending on doing, that, you know, potentially some of those no votes may have been yes votes. So I wanted to ask you on your personal perspective of, I guess, firstly, are you aware of Pembroke's master plan for the site? Given that you're across the road, I imagine that maybe you have a bit more information than a previous deputy. And number two, knowing what Pembroke is intending to doing with the site, does that colour your, does that change your perception of whether we should effectively enable Pembroke to go ahead with their plans by, you know, revoking the community land? So does knowing what they're going to do with it influence your decision?
Thank you. There's about three parts to that question, if I might answer them independently. Firstly, no, we don't know what Pembroke have in store at the moment. I've had discussions with their representatives, as a number of other community members have. The statement from Pembroke at the moment is that they have no firm master plan for the Haslam Oval precinct. Pembroke have undertaken a whole of school master plan process. That's been done on at least 2 occasions over the last 10 years. But at the moment, they are in the process, so I am to believe, as I am told, of dividing up the school into separate precincts, and will then be progressing individual precinct plans, Haslam Oval, junior school, middle school, senior school and the like, but they are yet to be commenced. Last time I spoke with somebody from their representatives, they were in the process of actually engaging architects for each of those individual master plans. So no, I do not know what it is. Would it have influenced my decision as to how the revocation process would go? Maybe, but that's very much dependent upon what that outcome is, how it's to be developed, as John indicated. Are some of the trees to be retained and the like? Is the majority of the space to be retained? My personal relevance to it would be based on activity. The extent of activity on that oval, whether or not the redevelopment of that exacerbates any existing issues that are found by the community in traffic, noise, light spill, red lights from the scoreboard being left on overnight, and the like that shine straight into the east-facing houses on the western side of Gers Road. Those sort of aspects, which are manageable, whether or not they have an impact in the overall context of that.
Thank you. Councillor Cornish.
Thanks for coming in. Same question that I asked Mr Walsh about the long-term lease. Would you be supportive of a long-term lease over these parcels of land to Pembroke?
I think there's going to be a similar answer to what I've just given.
Yeah.
It's a matter of, I don't know at this stage. In their current environment, given that they are encapsulated by the oval surrounds and the backs of the property and are effectively inaccessible to the general public, given the fenced arrangement of Haslam Oval, maybe it's acceptable on a conditional licence. Perhaps it's a licence under section 222 or I think it's section 222 of the Local Government Act, if my recollection is correct, and you're entitled to provide a licence to up to 42 years. A licence rather than a lease is probably more applicable in this particular instance, but that would be something for your administration to consider, and would probably also be required to go out to consultation based on...
Oh, it is under the Act. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, for coming along tonight. You mentioned some concerns you have about the watercourse and the issues associated with the easement over that. Could you please clarify a little bit more about how you think it would be best managed? Because currently we don't have an easement over that land, which amazes me, especially since this has been going on since 2015, we were made aware. Is there any advice, with your extensive experience in planning and all of those areas, that you could give us or make comment on tonight?
Well, firstly, what I would suggest is I'm not a lawyer, and I think this entails a legal opinion. And I think this council should actually engage with, if they haven't already, I don't know whether they have, I think only the administration and the CEO would be aware if they've sought that opinion, is to whether or not there may well be any implied easements on the fact that this is an existing watercourse, albeit an enclosed watercourse and forming part of that Stonyfield Creek system. Whether or not through the question of adverse possession, the fact that it's been in existence and continually used for community infrastructure over that time, that the council actually has the opportunity of claiming an easement over that infrastructure through adverse possession. Again, it's a legal term. I know a little bit about it, not the ins and outs of it. Furthermore, you've then got the question of whether or not the infrastructure should be there in the first place. Should council actually realign this infrastructure along Dunstan Avenue, put stormwater infrastructure in Gers Road? There's no stormwater infrastructure in Gers Road at the moment. There's no infrastructure, as I understand it, in Dunstan Avenue at the moment. Effectively, it comes down, it gets collected, and all funnels under Haslam Oval through that existing infrastructure. So basically, it fed into a creek system. That creek system's now a piped system. So, in my opinion, I think council needs to undertake further investigations to actually identify whether or not they have a legitimate claim to that infrastructure in the first place.
Thank you very much. I have no one else on the board, so... Oh, sorry, you must have taken it off.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vincent. So there was a remark you made about negotiate, that the Chief Executive Officer negotiate, and you didn't think that was a good idea, and that's in our recommendation. One of item 4 says that we authorise the CEO to negotiate appropriate access, etc., with Pembroke School. So my question is, would discuss be a better word for now?
I think in the first instance the council actually needs to understand its rights. I think you need to actually investigate and understand the exact legal rights that you might actually have to that infrastructure in the first place. Like there's a lot of this council has a history of actually having stormwater infrastructure under private land. It was 25 years ago when I worked here, and the infrastructure department at that stage knew and has all the full mapping of all that infrastructure 25 years ago. It goes under some private land, it goes under some public land, it goes under the roads, it goes under ovals and reserves and the like. It's mapped. It's within your mapping system itself. So for that particular purpose, I'd actually be suggesting, if the administration doesn't have that advice in the first place, that they should actually investigate every opportunity for the claim of an easement over that land, rather than first of all just jumping in to negotiate a position.
Councillor Jones.
Greg, thank you for coming. I just wanted to say at the end, your reading of the report was exactly the same as mine. And I wrote to the CEO on Friday night to say so, that whilst I agree with the recommendation, I thought it was trying to give us a steer to say, no, approve the sale of the land. So thank you for coming. I think the community thanks you for it.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much for coming in and sharing your comments and answering all those questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent. Right, now I'm going to go through the reports and ask you to indicate if you wish to withdraw it, so by using your button, thank you. So I'll start off with Haslam Oval. Councillor Davey. Glenunga Oval. No one, so, you didn't put your microphone. We're using the button. Okay, so Councillor Lemon. Bell. Councillor Turnbull. Use your button, please. Then I don't have anyone accusing me of not seeing the persons whose hand went up first, all right? Next one is Verge Development. Councillor Councillor Davey, you've got your microphone on. Did you press it for that one?
I pressed the button.
Okay,
yes.
so you press the button first, so therefore it is you.
Thank you.
Can I just get you to clear in between so I don't have people hanging on from the last one? Thank you. I think that makes it a little fairer. Right, now, draft public art policy. Councillor. Activity report, moved by Councillor Henschke, and have the microphone on properly.
Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Cornish. All those in favour?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have an alternative motion, if that could be brought up, and then I'll read that and then my time will start, I presume. My motion reads that Council notes the outcome of public consultation in report number 106-22 of 10th of May 2022. 2, does not proceed with a request by Pembroke School to revoke community land classification of 5 parcels of community land located at Haslam Oval and Dunstan Avenue, Kensington Park. 3, advises Pembroke School accordingly. 4, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to explore the opportunity to obtain and effect appropriate easement rights and management arrangements through any means possible in relation to the subject land and any council drainage infrastructure. And 5, contacts the respondents of the public consultation and advises them of the outcome of the council's determination.
Can I ask a question on the wording? Yes. In terms of point, how does the administration view through any, like to explore through any means possible? Is that, are you going to do it?
I could add any and all means possible.
So, through Madam Mayor, I might ask Councillor Davey just to expound what she means by that short statement.
Can I talk to it now? Oh. Oh, you. Oh, sorry. So it's to cover all aspects of the related to the easement. We've heard some advice tonight from an eminent planning expert, and it's to, instead of saying to negotiate with Pembroke School, it's to explore how we can obtain and effect appropriate easement rights. So whether it's legal, through legal advice, or any other means. So it gives the CEO all the scope possible, as I see it, to determine and effect the most appropriate easement rights based on the fact that it's not apparently plain and as obvious as we think it might be, that there might be other reasons for that. So that's the intent. I'm happy to massage that if necessary.
Can you say, like, request the CEO to obtain?
Just a minute.
Through Madam Mayor, I'm quite comfortable with the wording. I'm interpreting that, you know, I'll do everything reasonably in my power to achieve an outcome for council.
Sorry, just a minute. If you turn your microphone off,
Oh,
that one doesn't, two on it.
Can I make a yes, I've got no issue with the wording.
Shouldn't we just direct you to do everything possible for you to obtain an easement, rather than ask you to explore?
Yeah, if I may, Madam Mayor, I just need the wording on the screen. Can I suggest that?
What if it's not an easement?
That's right. So it should be where it says appropriate easement rights. I need to give myself some leeway because an easement may not be the best outcome. This directs me to have an easement, but there may be other alternatives.
So you're suggesting remove the word easement?
Mr. Cam, what was your suggestion?
Just get rid of the word easement.
Yep, there we go.
Or management arrangements.
Yep, and then that covers it.
But shouldn't we say the CEO, is like the council directs the CEO to obtain, rather than to explore? Explore doesn't mean you're actually going to go and obtain it. Do it. Are we saying you should go do it? So
It's exploring and
yeah, we don't want to explore, we want to get it.
I don't think that's correct.
Just request the CEO to obtain.
This actually presupposes it'll come back to us if you're going to explore things, you're not going to make any decisions.
We might explore and just get lost.
Yep. So, through Madam Mayor, if the intent is for me just to do it, I agree. Need to lose the word explore and just direct me to do it. And I'll come back if I can't. I'll probably come back both ways and tell you how I've done it, but I'll also come back to you and tell you if I can't.
So you really want to remove those 4 words to explore the opportunity?
Or would it undertake be better than explore?
No, just get, yeah, authorize the chief executive to obtain.
To obtain and effect?
Yeah, you can explore the opportunity too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just take those 4 words
So
out.
it provides me with.
We're saying do this by any means possible. So if they demand $10 million, we've just authorised the CEO to spend $10 million on an easement.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
And we'll be protecting our land rights.
Hang on, one at a time. And we haven't even actually got to the motion yet. CEO?
If I can just clarify Councillor Jones's comment, I can only implement things that are within my delegation without coming back to council. So I am constrained by that aspect of it. So I think it's okay.
Now, Councillor Davey, you can speak to it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just read part 4 for those who might be listening at home. And part 4 reads, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to obtain and effect appropriate easement rights and/or management arrangements through any means possible in relation to the subject land and any council drainage infrastructure. So thank you everyone for your input. We sort of went into informal committee. The community consultation process in February has been decisive, as we've all read, with a result that 61% of Burnside respondents are opposed to sale of 5 parcels of land on or adjacent to Haslam Oval at Kensington Park. All the respondents' views are genuine and must be considered. They have made their views crystal clear. Major concerns raised, both in this consultation and in other avenues, relate to the principle that community-owned land should not be sold to private entities for profit or for development or subdivision. They're fairly basic principles that our community thinks strongly about. There are also issues about the lack of clear communication by the school as to the actual plans for the form of any Haslam Oval development. No one knows what will happen to all the well-established trees on site, the existing buildings, how car parking will be managed. That is, all the concerns associated with development of a school in a densely populated residential area. Pembroke is a wonderful school and very highly regarded, educating over 800 members of the Burnside population currently. Its enrolment is double that, but our population is half of the residents. But it exists, as we all know, amongst a densely populated residential area, and these residents will sustain a big impact from any development. The issue of the pipeline running through Haslam Oval and that whole drainage system, which we are not sure about or clear about, is important for council to manage. We have responsibilities under state legislation and under our Burnside watercourse management policy for management of the watercourses, whether they're encased in a pipeline or not, and these require access for inspection and maintenance. An easement is essential for this process. That's the only way we know how to do it. And it amazes me that we haven't applied for one before now, since this process has been going on for 7 or 8 years. Finally, the correspondence on page 72 of the report clearly indicates, because there is a bit of angst about the public consultation and the interpretation of it, which we've heard tonight, there was an indication that Pembroke was made aware of the outcome of the community consultation response before the release of the consultation report to us as council members or to the rest of the community. And I think this is inequitable and a possible breach of probity in the decision-making process.
Councillor Davey, that's your second bell.
Thank you.
I seek a
I
seconder.
hope you'll support this motion. Thank you.
I'm sure you can have more of an opportunity in your summary at the end.
Thank you.
And seek a seconder.
I'm happy to second.
Councillor Hughes,
I'll reserve my
you don't
right.
wish to speak right now? Anyone who does wish to speak? Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, I just have a question. In number 2, the words "at this time" have been removed from this resolution, this motion. Now, I want to ask a question of the governance officer. What effect does this have on the recommendation from the officers by removing these words? Is it the same? But can we again come back to this in 2 years' time, for instance? Or by removing "at this time," this means that we can't come back to this for a certain period of time? I just need the answer to that question.
Through Madam Mayor, the removal of those words doesn't impede my ability to bring a report back to council at any time.
Councillor Hubel. Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. A question for the administration through the Mayor, please. When the administration reports back to council in regards to item 4, in the motion. Will that include an investigation for a claim for an easement, and will it also include investigation of realigning the infrastructure, if at all possible, as suggested by Mr. Vincent?
Through Madam Mayor, it's a bit premature for me to say what the report will include because I haven't had those conversations with the school yet. So I can't definitively tell you what will and won't be in the report. Just considering the second part of your question, if I may, Madam Mayor, regarding to realignment, now, I agree that would be an amazing outcome, but it would be an extraordinarily expensive outcome. So without preempting anything, I don't think that's going to be the outcome. I will turn my mind to it, but I'll put council on notice that it would be horrendously expensive, and I think we should explore other avenues first.
Next is Councillor Davey. Question? Sorry, apologies. People seem to I write them down as well as put them on the screen, and then suddenly some of them disappear. So it's Councillor Cornish next. Sorry, Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I do support the recommendation as it currently stands. I would like to see council explore a long-term lease or licence over these parcels of land. I do think it's important that they retain as open space for the community at that end. I would be very, very fearful if a Plan B were to flip the current master plan that we've all seen of Pembroke School. And you know, even in the report, we've got some of the profile pictures of what Haslam Oval would look like, and I would be very scared of Plan B. So I do hope that you support this motion and that we look at providing them a long-term lease over this land so that it can be retained as ovals. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
I just have a question of the staff. It's just been mentioned, I guess, this evening through the deputations, but also Councillor Davey, just around a probity issue with going back to Pembroke, and I guess wanted to perhaps understand, it's important for the Chamber to understand what the process is around these applications and if there is an issue.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to provide insight to this one. I must admit I was slightly disappointed to hear that comment. The school has been dealt with in the same manner that we would deal with any applicant. And the officers have gone to lengths to provide elected members with as much information as possible. That was our intent, and we'll always do that with elected members, is to provide them all the information I'm physically able to offer. But I am very comfortable that there are no probity issues to answer in this case. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. I mean, it seems, the second deputies pointed out that and that line in the report, that if you remove we haven't seen their master plan line, then it probably would get over the line. So it seems to me if Pembroke actually released their master plan, rather than saying we don't have any plans, that potentially the community comes along with it. So if I was, and I think I said this to them when Pembroke actually came last time, that they should release their master plan, what they actually want to do with it, because otherwise the argument is simply, and I'm kind of two minds, like how important is C, D and E to this council? Not really, as long as you had access to the stormwater. But then again, why should we release the land when there's no master plan? There's no point to doing that when simply the response to do you have a master plan is, well, we need to know if we can get the land and then we'll do a master plan. It doesn't really seem the right way around. So I've kind of on two minds going, well, you know, if Pembroke want the land of CD and E is probably of very little value to residents, so why wouldn't we allow them to have it? But then the Pembroke School isn't really saying what they would do with it and why they want it. So it seems to me that if Pembroke School actually released their master plan and went back to the community, put this process again, they would actually succeed, which is what I think this council, particularly me, suggested they do at the beginning or at the end of last year. So I'm going to support the motion, and I think the chief executive, retaining easements over that pipe is perfectly acceptable. And if The word negotiate, from my point of view, there is absolutely no problem with that, because the first thing you should do is call Pembroke School and say, are you going to consent to this, regardless of what anyone says. So do it the cheapest way possible. Negotiate isn't a concession thing, so I see no problem with it, but also directing the chief executive to enact those easements is something we should be doing, I suppose, so we can actually access it. So yeah, but I think we'll be seeing this again probably next year. I would imagine, if Pembroke School release a master plan.
Councillor Turnbull.
My question is in relation to the easement. When was the last time that council had to use the fact they have an easement for that stormwater pipe? Does it clog up, or what happens with it? Please. Does it occur often as well?
Through Madam Mayor, I'm fairly sure I know the answer, but I'll refer to Ms Kennedy.
Through the chair, we're not aware of any regular or routine maintenance issues associated with that pipe in recent times.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. It kills me to say this as a former Pulteney boy, but Pembroke is a fantastic school. It is one of the biggest, it is one of the most successful schools in the state, and a lot of people move to Burnside for the school, in the same reason they moved to Glenunga and so forth. So we have a lot to thank the school for putting Burnside in such a great position with property values and so forth. It is a major, major draw card to our area. I want to see the school grow and succeed and continue to be a very successful school in the future. And my thinking is probably along the same lines as Councillor Davis, where I accept the results, but a lot of me thinks that, it could have been very different if people could actually see what it could be. And I can't help but draw parallels between this and the Will Park. And that is people, and as the first speaker even acknowledged, people do tend to fear the unknown. And we've heard this mentioned many times in this chamber. People fear the unknown. So I will accept it. I do deep down believe that one day Haslam Oval could be a very special and beautiful place. We talk about increasing physical activity in children. We talk about getting children off the couch and more involved into physical activity and so forth. We talk about these things. And this is a perfect example of achieving that objective. But we're voting against it, for now anyway. So I think moving forward, I think the school, like Councillor Davis mentioned, I think the school could have done more. If they really wanted to get this over the line, they should have done more. I'm amazed that their public relations department didn't address this issue much earlier on in the picture. But I will accept it. I'm disappointed, but the people have spoken, and I will fulfil their wishes.
Councillor Jones.
Oh, that was quick. Look, I'm pleased to support this motion. Thank you, Councillor Davey, for proposing it. I think the people have quite clearly spoken, and we should follow what the community consultation says. I have to say, I'm not that fussed about getting an easement, but I'm not going to die in a ditch about it. Last meeting, I had a question on notice. There are 23.7 kilometres of stormwater pipes in Burnside on private property, and the council cannot tell us how many we have an easement over. And there doesn't seem to be a great problem of us not being able to fix stormwater pipes. So, frankly, I'd save the money, CEO, but, let's take the win and vote for this great motion.
Now, I have nobody else on my screen, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Davey to, Councillor Hughes. You only asked a question, sorry.
No, I haven't spoken. I don't really have a lot to add to the debate. I think it's all been covered off this evening. I think, as has been mentioned by deputies this evening, if there was more information available, we may have got a different result. I think it was great to see a large number of the community actually respond. And I guess I did get called from residents throughout this process saying, oh, you voted to sell the land. I was like, no, I actually voted to give you the opportunity to tell us what we should do. And I appreciate the feedback that we've got. There were a lot of people that have gone to a lot of effort to provide this feedback. So, I'm happy to support the motion as it stands this evening. I was waiting for my clap. How hard you got a clap?
Councillor Davey, to summarise, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you everyone for your input. It's a very interesting topic to discuss. In regards to the future for the school, they've still got huge numbers of opportunities. They're a fabulous school, as I have said. In actual fact, the letter that the CEO wrote us on the 29th of April tells us that their school population is only comprised of half of the school population is comprised of Burnside residents, not the whole school population. So we do look after lots of other parts of Adelaide. It's up to the school and available to Pembroke to resume this process to apply for revocation of the community land titles or whatever they want to do when they're better prepared with a concrete master plan for the Haslam Oval site. I mean, there's just so many variables there and so many opportunities and so much they can do to work with the community and inform the community to get them on side. The issue of licensing of this community land is interesting, and I hadn't thought about that. It hasn't been raised before, and so it hasn't been explored. So I thank my colleagues for raising that. I think we do need to sort out the status of any easement over the piped watercourses, and I think it's essential that we proceed with this because we just have to, under our legal Local Government Act and Watercourse Policy Act responsibilities. I remain unhappy that the CEO of Pembroke was supplied with the details of the results of the community consultation, such that they were enabled to provide a letter providing comment on this, which is dated the 29th of April on page 72 of our report, because I, as one of the local councillors, asked for the results of this, and I was told I had to wait till everybody else got the results. And we were then provided them 3 days before the report became public. While Pembroke may have initiated the request to change the land title, they are but one stakeholder in the process. Our community is an equal stakeholder and very important. So I take on board that criticism, and I hope that we can too in our considering of consultation reports. It's very important that we have the most we apply good governance in all of our dealings, and we don't want to have this accusation made again. So I hope you'll support this motion. Thank you for all your support to date, and I hope we can clarify this and decide tonight. Thank you.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Right, Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. Do you mind if I wait till people come back? Oh, there's only one missing. I commend the officer's recommendation to you on Glenunga Oval reconstruction. Those of us that have been around for a while know that the ovals in Glenunga have been in dire straits for many years, and we've had band-aid solutions to them for a long time. it depends, and often it depends on whether we're having a wet season in spring, whether we're having an extra wet season in winter, and the use of the ovals as sporting fields. This report takes a long-term view of fixing the problem pretty much properly. And we're starting by looking at what sorts of things we can do. The ovals have quite a drop on them from one side to the other. It's something like a metre and a half, possibly actually even 2 metres, which also doesn't help a drainage issue. And it's the drainage issue that actually causes the turf to get churned up and the grass then just simply not to grow again. Overuse also is a problem with it. These things are all covered in this report, and I'm really pleased to see a longer term plan to actually get these ovals back into better condition than what they are, because we are so short on playing spaces in Burnside. It is the only, the Webb Oval is the only soccer oval that we've got in Burnside. So I think we need to do, this is part of our infrastructure. We've just been talking about an oval that doesn't belong to us. These ovals, there's 2 ovals that do belong to us, and they're very valuable pieces of infrastructure, and I think it's very important that we look at the best way we can preserve them for future use. So I commend this to you.
Councillor Cornish, I'm assuming you wish to second?
I'll second and reserve, thanks.
Right. Councillor Dawes.
Yes, I support this motion, but I, in particular, I want to look at the future as well. So I would refer councillors to clause 33, paragraph 33, which I think, apart from the funds to develop the oval, is the most important part of this particular item. Now, my question first of all is, have we currently got a wet weather policy for the use of our ovals, including Glenunga? And if we have, who is the decision maker?
Through Madam Mayor, I have to refer that to Mr. Kent.
Through the Mayor, we have an informal management plan for each of our ovals, taking into account the existing uses and also the monthly condition reports that we get on each of our sports fields throughout the city. We have a loose management plan down at Glenunga Oval just now, working with all of the clubs. However, we recognise that as part of this process that we need to formalise that and get all of the clubs on the same page. We actually had a meeting with them last night, and we had agreement with the clubs where we will start managing it better and more consistently across the board, particularly down at Glenunga Reserve.
Yeah, so if I can now speak, Mayor. I know with the university ovals, if it rained heavily during the day and there was practice at night, then the groundsman would be the decision maker as to whether there'd be training on that oval on that night. And that upset some of the clubs because they wanted to train at any time. And it affects mainly the sports where the ball is on the ground more often, like soccer, rather than football. But I do recommend to administration that you put that in place, but the decision maker, if I can recommend this, is not the clubs, but it is your head groundsman or whoever it is that makes the call at 4 o'clock on the day of training or whatever. That's how we're going to maintain these ovals beyond this massive redevelopment of the ovals. But if I could just pass it on through past experience. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
I don't disagree with Councillor Dawes. I think it's fine to fix the condition and fully support that. But ongoing, we need to look at how we're managing this asset, because we don't want to be in the same position in 5 years' time. And if you look at the data around club usage and teams, I understand that we lease it for periods of time, but having numbers of teams almost double over that last 7, 8, 10-year period means you've got double the foot traffic on that, even though you've got the same amount of time. So, I'm happy to support. I think one of the key things we need to do is keep our ovals in good condition, keep people wanting to play sport. But I completely agree with Councillor Dawes. That should be up to us to decide whether the grounds are suitable for matches to go ahead. It shouldn't be clubs making that decision, because it's not them that have to foot the bill at the end of the day to repair and patch these facilities. They are our facilities. So I appreciate that administration have obviously taken that on board, and look forward to seeing and hearing how we will be managing that in the future.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Questions for the administration, please. Is there a condition assessment of ovals process that we have in the asset management planning system?
Through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr. Kent.
Through the Mayor, it's separate to the asset management system. IPOS, who conducted the sports ground usage and capacity assessment, are engaged and have been engaged for 10 years or more to do monthly sports ground inspections. So this capacity assessment was taken into account the increased usage and also the data received during those monthly condition assessments that's undertaken.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up question, please? Why are ovals as assets separate in the asset management plan, our asset management strategy and planning? Are they not an asset?
The capital irrigation and drainage system is an asset. The condition of an oval is not, in terms of a classification of the word asset.
Okay, thank you. I'll speak to the motion now. I'm just surprised. We've got this surprise for capital at this stage in the budget planning cycle. So that's why I was asking questions about why it's not in our asset management planning system, because that's how we don't get surprises, because condition of our assets is monitored, and then we can plan ahead, plan our capital going forward. And we do seem to have quite an investment of assets in irrigation and ovals, so perhaps that might be something we might want to consider, because this is two ovals, and it's $2 million, and we may well have more in the pipeline. So they're just my comments for now. I suppose I expect the clubs will be driving, this is driven by requests from the clubs possibly as well. But it is a significant investment to suddenly appear. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
I've got a question, if I may. If this was an upgrade of a building, our community facilities policy would apply, and we'd say we'll fund this up to 50%, depending on various criteria. So I can't quite see why the spirit of that policy doesn't apply, and we aren't saying to the clubs, well, come to us with some funding, and we will consider this. So I'm a bit baffled, because some of these sports have got heaps of money.
Through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr. Kent for a comment.
Through the Mayor, you are correct that the policy position that you quoted covers buildings only. I don't disagree that the spirit of the policy cannot apply, because it's certainly an asset that's shared by clubs as well as the community and the school. The report is quite clear that we will bring, when we have a better understanding of the design requirements and also the better estimated cost once we've undertaken that design requirements, we will also bring back funding options to council to determine whether they wish to proceed at that stage, which will include external funding opportunities, whether it be state, federal, sporting club bodies, etc.
I have no one on the screen, so if you're happy, I shall return to Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. As we've just been told, once the beginning of this once this is passed, we'll be spending $70,000 in the first instance to actually look at what the issues are. And the other funding can take place over a period of time. What the report also says is that we'll be looking at other forms of funding. It's not necessarily all going to be council funding, so it may well be that clubs may be asked to contribute as well as state and federal agencies. So, I mean, I think it's unfortunate that we're in this position. It is because it is such a fantastic oval, or two ovals, such a fantastic place. Not only is it used by the clubs, but it's also used every day by members of the community, and it's used every school day by members of the school. So it is the biggest bit of green space in my ward, and it is very important that we do everything we can to preserve it at its peak. So I do hope you support it.
I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. And now I move to the Verge Development Policy Review, which is, oh sorry, I missed one. Important one, the Belliet Reserve Master Plan, which is Councillor Turnbull. Sorry about that, Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone who's read the Belliet Management Plan has to be very impressed, not only with the actual plan and the attention to detail, but specifically with the community consultation process. It's a model for all future community consultations. So I'd like to thank the team, Aaron, Kelly and Belinda. It wasn't an easy brief because many residents have lived adjacent to and near the Belliet Reserve for many years. They enjoy it as it is. It's lovely and quiet and peaceful, piece of country and suburbia. Other residents, especially those with children, wanted to see other amenities and attractions. All the residents' ideas had to be listened to and managed by the team. In summary, for this model community consultation process, the first session was held in the Belliet Reserve with the purpose of gathering ideas from the local community. About 50 people attended. The first co-design, and note the word co-design, workshop was held at the ballroom on the 20th of November. About 70 residents braved the cold, wet weather to participate. The crowning glory was the My Big Bright Idea for Belliet, to which the participants could contribute. It was popular. The students and staff at St Peter's Girls' School were also involved in a workshop. Then 3 master plans were developed by the landscape architects, and they were displayed at another public meeting at Belliet in February. And about 70 residents, using sticky dots to choose one of the plans and sticky notes to provide comments, came along to that. I really want to commend our staff and the landscape architects for the respect, the patience, the listening skills they showed at all times. It was exemplary. Community consultation round 2 occurred and over 181 responses were received. As Aaron stated, this is much higher than for recent similar initiatives, demonstrating the community's interest in this park as well as their support for the community-led process we undertook. So the recommended Master Plan 2 option was strongly preferred by participants by 78%. It includes upgraded entries, 2 picnic tables, barbecue, additional bench seats around the perimeter of the park, yay, a walking path loop, upgraded courts for half-court basketball, upgraded path surfaces, yay again, irrigated turf, more trees and underplantings, etc. If you look at the map, you can see it all there. But the big plus for many residents was not overdoing the amenities and the extras, but still allowing space and ambience for humans and dogs to walk in a peaceful setting. I love it, and I hope you'll vote for this Belliet Master Plan as recommended. Thank you.
Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Lemon, you wish to second it?
Yes, I will. And I'd absolutely endorse everything Councillor Turnbull's just said. This co-design is the gold standard for community involvement. And if we did this sort of co-design, it would have been incredibly labour intensive, but you see the results are sensational. If we did this, for everything that we did, you could get rid of this chamber because the community would be running the place. And they'd be doing it really, really well. This is a brilliant piece of work, and it's just fantastic. I opened our agenda and I started reading this report, and I'm just thinking, my God, where did this come from? This is sensational. This is brilliant. This is the work that's gone into it, the absolute care and attention to detail is phenomenal, and I thank administration for it and I commend it to you.
I have no other names here. Councillor Piggott.
My learned friend here sort of implied I shouldn't speak. I too liked it, actually. Yes, I do liked it. Look, it is a great piece of work. I actually wanted to raise a question just about the timing. We've done this before, I think, where we've put sort of bits of money, sort of potential in years out into the future. And it just struck me, and perhaps I don't need to do anything tonight, but it struck me that we should perhaps get to the end of the master plan suggestions quicker than what is currently put in the plan. But it is certainly a good plan, and listening to Councillor Turnbull, that is, it's certainly been done well, and the results do come out very well. And it is a fine line, I think, between it is a fine line, perhaps, between too much and too little things happening in our company reserves, and we've spoken about that at various times about other reserves. This seems like a good balance. So I certainly support the motion, and I would support us accelerating how quickly we get to the end of it. Thanks.
Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, Mayor, there is something there on the, just so I wanted to point it out to you. There. Okay. Okay. Basically, there have been 4 rounds plus one unofficial where Councillor Turnbull and I met with some residents following those 4 rounds. So it was fantastic from the point of view that we were open, and so you would have found in this report that we've got the warts and all. You know, we've got people who don't necessarily agree, but with 80%, you've got to say that, gee, this is what the majority of the residents in our ward would like to do. So the community involvement was fantastic. That's already been said by a number of people. There are still some little bits and pieces that we need to sort out. You know, as you would have picked in the report, there is an underlying issue with St Peter's Girls using that reserve, and the staff are continuing those discussions with certain members of the close community nearby. But what I was pleased about was that when we started off with 50 in the first consultation, I thought it would drop away. And in fact, it increased. And then for the survey, we had over 180. You know, it's just unbelievable. When I compare it to some of the surveys we've had with Penfold Park and others, and Lower Avenue, this is fantastic. So it is a reserve. It doesn't need a lot of work, as Councillor Turnbull said. It did need a little bit more than it has in the past, but not overly so. So I've been pleased with the amount of consultation going on. As I've said before, I will support something where the residents clearly state that they want something to be improved. So thank you, Councillor Turnbull, for your words.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I endorse all the comments made, particularly as it's a benchmark for community consultation. I think this process has been an exemplar and one we can all learn from for how we can bring our community along with us and really involve them at grassroots level. I, of course, love the emphasis on the natural space, the trees and the grassed areas. I was very pleased to see that there was no support for uplighting of trees at night, which disturbs the vegetation and our nocturnal creatures, and it's just totally unnecessary. It's a bit too engineered for my liking. There's some areas where I'd like it to be a bit more rustic, but if that's what people want, I think it's fantastic. The one question I do have is and particularly love the vegetation choices. Perhaps Councillor Turnbull might have had some say in those. The ones on at Para 7, I don't know the page, are fantastic. Page 225. But the one question I have is what ongoing maintenance budget we have for maintaining and looking after the gardens and the greens so that we don't lose any of them once they're planted. Thanks.
Through Madam Mayor, I might hand that over to Mr. Cant just for a quick comment.
Through the Mayor, I can't give you a figure off the top of my head. However, whenever we do endorse these master plans and then start to enact the changes or the improvements throughout, we then do a operational budget amendment in each annual budget to ensure that the maintenance is appropriate for the increased level of service required.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Mayor Monso. Look, I know that probably no one wants to move a variation or support a variation because everyone loves the report, but I would like to pull the Councillor Hughes manoeuvre around actually including the years in the report, because as Councillor Piggott said, he wants to do them all quicker, right? So I think if you put the years in there, you actually end up with giving the community an expectation, and the next council might go, we're not funding that. We don't want any rate increases if it's just full of Councillor Piggotts. So I don't know whether anyone would support, but I would like to move a variation that on page 227, remove the column stating the year as we already have the priorities, and that would then be consistent with the previous master plans for Penfold, and there was one other where I pulled the same manoeuvre. So I think it's fair to be consistent across the board by removing the year. No, because it means that you could do stuff quicker, is what I'm saying. So, you know, it could though. I think it sets an expectation within the community that, oh, like it's all going to be done within that time, and we don't necessarily, think we may not have that money, or we might want to do it quicker. So I just think you've listed the priorities. Staff can then present them through the budget, and this would then be consistent with the other master plans that we presented. Oh, so you don't have to vote for it. So can I just move the amendment then?
Master Plan 2022.
That
Brilliant idea.
implement stages, but like, can we just put a second point? On page 227, which I'm not sure will be the what final page, remove the column stating the years.
Except the first one.
But no, because I'm leaving that first one. Implement the stages according to the plan, because you can stage it, but you just remove the years from the final plan. And that's then like we did that with Penfold, and we did it with something else, Tregenza Oval. So the council approves the bill, it must plan implement it in stages. So we are saying, yes, we will do it in stages. We've got high priority and low priority. We're commencing next year because we will do that first bit, but then we remove the column stating the years from the final plan. I just think it gives us then flexibility to pull more things in and perhaps tweak that as budget becomes available, or you know, Councillor Piggott might want to do it all in one hit, or the next council may go, well, we might get to the do the high priorities and the medium priorities, and then we might just put the rest on hold. And I think if you lock it in, you lock it in, and then you manage that expectation.
Can you also
The amendment's been proposed by Councillor Hughes and I believe seconded by Councillor Davis. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Davis?
2022.
No.
Sorry, can we just put after the Billiot Master Plan 2022? I don't know whether it's Master Plan 2022 after Master Plan, the very first line. Thank you. Sorry to be a nuisance when everyone obviously supports that and it thinks it is great. I just think this will bring everything in line with the manoeuvre that I pulled last time.
That clear with everybody? Councillor Davis may clarify it further.
Someone else has got the red.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to second the amendment, and I do agree with it, because sometimes you can't go ahead with certain works in one part of the city or not, and then you do lock it in, at least from a resident's expectations point of view. I didn't want to commend the administration or the community. I wanted to commend us for how much we agree with this process and the report. I think our concurrence on things is often, not given enough emphasis. And everyone else had their own favourite part of the master plan. So I'd like to point out that I really like the play space, going back to a natural environment, moving away from artificial colours or metals and things like that. And I do really think that is an important part of it. There has been a lot of research in terms of a lot of early learning centres about how they approach their play spaces, and so I'm really happy to see that being incorporated throughout the city, and I hope that continues. So, congratulations, all of us.
Councillor Dawes.
I just want to make sure I've got it right, that we're not saying that 22-23 will just be high priority. We are saying that will stay in the budget discussions. Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I have some issues with this. So I've got some questions for administration. I actually think that if somebody picks up the minutes of this meeting in 5 years' time, that second sentence will make no sense whatsoever. And I think we need to try and make it make sense. And I think one of the things we can do is in there somewhere say something about, according to the action plan in the minutes, in the agenda of the 10th of May meeting on page. And then it's very clear that the columns stating the years in the final plan are in that table. I just think that you take that column out of that table and you have this thing in 5 years' time. Makes no sense at all to anyone that's looking at it. I could be wrong. What does anybody else think?
I see that this is not an amendment, it's just an addition to, well, it's nothing diverse from what was planned. So with the acceptance of the mover and seconder, then I'd be happy for that inclusion to take place.
Well, I'm the seconder, and I just don't think this, I don't think this will mean
Of the
anything.
amendment, yes.
Yeah, okay. So what?
No, we're on the amended motion, Councillor Turnbull. So it's actually Councillor Hughes and Councillor Davis who have to agree. Just give it a title.
In the agenda. In this agenda. That would make more sense.
No, you'll just have to say that so that... Oh, sorry, it's me.
Oh.
My fault. Hang on.
Sorry. So could we just say, and remove the column on page 227, the year column. Yeah, well, it's just stating the year. Remove the column on page 227, stating the years, and then you could maybe put in brackets, table summary of priorities and cost estimates, close bracket, from the master plan. Does that make slightly more sense?
Just finish that off.
Oh, sorry, summary of priorities and cost estimates table.
Capital letters.
You maybe put capital letters on summary, priorities, cost estimates table. Okay, so maybe, sorry, just to tidy it up a little bit and keep everyone at the table happy, because it might then perhaps give a little bit more chance of it succeeding. After commencing 2022-23, put a full stop, new sentence, and then new paragraph, remove, yeah, part one, remove. part 2, remove that. I'm happy with that thank you for all indulging me in getting that looking a little bit sharper.
Do we need point 1 then? Oh yeah, I guess it's in the, oh yeah.
Of the agenda, page 227 of the agenda.
Yes, of the agenda after 227.
Of the agenda 10th of May 222.
I think you probably actually need to say that council, colon, 1
yeah.
approves, and 2, or A approves, and B, yeah.
Oh, surely we get it.
Now, councillor Piggott.
Thank you. Now we've got that sharp. Could I just ask a question of administration? In the absence of doing this amendment and leaving the years in there, is it fair to say that the years, basically council administration then would put each of those amounts of money into a long-term financial plan, which would be the default position, and you couldn't make them less or more, or quicker or slower, without a motion of council? So it would be the worst, it would be a default position, no worse than that, if we left them in as years.
Through Madam Mayor, yes, it is a correct statement. So we would use this to inform our long-term financial plan. But I would like to think that when we got to 23, 24, for example, when we're compiling the budget, if there was the opportunity to deliver this project faster, that we would have turned our mind to the opportunity.
And could a follow-up question, in the absence of the years in the action plan, you got to 23, 24 and you're a bit short of cash, could you also defer the 23, 24 project to 24, 25, in the absence of the years being in the action plan?
Through Madam Mayor, it would certainly give us that flexibility. But I might, but if I may, looking at the numbers, I'm sure my team would be the view that we'd try and deliver this project sooner rather than later.
I have no further names on this now. Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Question just to clarify with the administration, please. On page 219 of the Aspect Studios report, it says opportunities number 4, historical and cultural background. I just didn't see in the officer's report clarification of what that actually means. Are we talking about Ghana historical and cultural background as well in the whole Bell-Yet Reserve Master Plan? Because I can't see in the officer's report a mention of the Ghana acknowledgement. Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Question afterwards. Okay, I'll ask again. Thank you.
No one else on the screen wishing to speak on the amendment. So, and if I remember rightly, the mover doesn't get a chance to speak again. So I will put the amendment. Those in favour? Those against? The amendment is carried, so it becomes the motion. And now the motion reads as on the screen at the moment. So we've approved the master plan and added the remove column, part of the column. Removing the column. Right, okay. So now it is, I'm hoping Wendy has kept a record of those who have spoken and those who haven't, because there are probably limited people who can now speak, but not limited in terms of asking questions. So, Councillor Henschke, now you can repeat your question.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Madam Mayor, my question, Madam Mayor, is in relation to page 219, where the Aspect Studios Opportunities and Constraints report says an opportunity is historical and cultural background, provide improved connections to heritage and history of the site. But I just wanted to clarify, I didn't see that clarified or expanded upon in the officer's report, to the extent that I understand that we would have be referring to the Ghana cultural heritage in the project. Just wanted to know whether that was going to be done or later, perhaps. I'm not sure. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr. Kent.
Through the Mayor, the page that you're referring to there is part of the initial background documentation that was prepared by the consultant to develop a SWOT analysis right at the start to commence the process. While we haven't expanded on it specifically within the master plan, we can assure you, keeping in mind Council's current position with this, that that is a key component of part of the signage strategy on the site.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I'll jump in on things I like about this as well. Look, the native play, nature play stuff is absolutely amazing. And look, being an educator, you know, I can nerd out about this if you really want to lean into it. You know, have a look into the Reggio Emilia philosophy and approach to education, whereas the environment is actually the third party in the educational process. So there you go. I hope that some people realise the precedent will be setting with the trike track. I think when we've got young children, you know, moving beyond the trike track and getting too big for it, they're going to be wanting a skate park. So I'll just leave that there for you all.
Right, I haven't anyone else on the screen. Is there anyone else who has not spoken or who wishes to speak? Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I quite like this, but given that Councillor Dawes wanted to inflict a basketball hoop on my residence, I noticed that there's one lacking in this plan.
Oh.
I'm just pleased to see a table tennis table. Right, no one else to speak? I do go back to the original move, I don't know. Jenny, yeah. So now I'm back to Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. I've waxed lyrical about this report before, so I'm going to sum her up by paraphrasing Mr Schroeder. I hope he doesn't mind me saying, the Belliet Master Plan achieves a balance of multiple complementary uses for all ages, preferences and abilities, while respecting and enhancing the reserve's environmental features. And that says it all, really. It's a beauty. So I hope you vote for it. Thank you.
All those in favour? Hands are already up. And those against? Carried. I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute break now, which means we moved by Councillor Davey, seconded by Councillor Cornish. All those in favour? So we resume at 9 o'clock. Okay, we need to start again, everybody. It's 9:02. Okay, everybody, we all want to go home? Right. Councillor Jones just wishes to say something before we restart.
For the record, I just wish to say Councillor Dawes is right and I was wrong. There is a basketball hoop at Balliet Reserve.
Thank you. Okay, so we will now move to the Verge Development Policy. Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you. I'm happy to move in accordance with the recommendation in its entirety. I want to thank the administration for their upgrade of the Verge Development Policy. It's really important as part of our streetscape, and it's an area where we can have all sorts of debates. I wouldn't say conflict, but debates about people who look after things and people who don't. So it's really good to clear the whole situation, review the criteria and re-clarify the situation and make it clearer. The one question I have, so I recommend all of the changes. The one question I have is, how do we deal with people who have let their verges, when it's in the situation where someone has maintained it, they've sold the house and someone else has come in and they've got no intention of maintaining all these plants and shrubs and it just looks really shabby. At what stage can we intervene and what process? Because I've been asked this a couple of times and it's not entirely clear here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr Cant.
Through the Mayor, it's difficult to give you an actual timeline or an instance of how or at what point we intervene. However, if we believe the verge through the conditions of the enhancement is no longer being cared for or kept to a standard which was indicated within the agreement, we would negotiate with that resident to determine whether or not they are going to revisit it and continue to bring it back to that standard. That's our first and best preferred option to try and get it back to that standard. If it gets to the point where we believe it's neglected and it requires remediation, at that stage we will remediate back to lawned verge at that stage.
Have you finished, Councillor Davey? Go on then.
In terms of those that haven't been approved, because turn the microphone back on. I'll ask later on. Oh no, I'm right. Some of them predate any sort of approval. I've got one in my street, that's how I know. And so, is it the trigger, the same trigger, but not checking the records or whatever?
Through the Mayor, the policy, and when we last updated the policy with this council, we made it clear that the policy position is not retrospective. However, there has been occasions where we have spoken with the residents to determine whether or not we can either improve the condition of their planted verge or return it to lawn. But technically, if you have some verges that are already a material that's not consistent with the current policy, the policy itself is not retrospective.
Councillor Turnbull, I assume you wish to second it?
I'll second it.
Yeah, and ask a question?
Yes, please. I it's a parallel question.
Can I just say, yeah, don't we have to have a seconder first? Oh, sorry.
Like usually. So. My question is, what happens if the verge policy is ignored and the resident goes ahead with, for example, plastic and gravel, which has happened in our ward very, very recently? Stack of it.
Through the Mayor, under the Local Government Act, we have the authority and the ability to go in and work with the residents. Quite often, we will, if they've done it without permission, we will allow them to put in an application, and if it is consistent with the policy, we will consider it at that stage. If it is not, then it should be reinstated as it previously was.
A follow-up question, is there a timeline for this?
Through the Mayor, I don't believe the legislation actually has a time associated with it. I will double check that tomorrow and take it on notice, and I'll get back to you.
Could I speak to it? I'd actually like to move an amendment. And my amendment is... Can I?
No, you can't move an amendment if you're seconding.
Okay.
So you could withdraw your seconding.
I'd withdraw my seconding.
And I could seek someone else to second.
Thank you. I've asked a question.
No, she don't ask a question.
I'm happy to second, I reserve my right to speak.
Okay. So, Councillor Turnbull, now you wish to move an amendment.
Yes, please. Yes, my amendment is that council adopts, where are we? That council adopts the revised verge development policy with changes made to conditions to ensure hard landscaping is prohibited. And could I speak to it?
Hang on a minute, we just need to get the words.
Hard landscaping is concrete, pavers, etc.
I'll accept that as
although you'll accept it, I think it is different from what was originally proposed, and I do appreciate your willingness. Councillor Hughes?
I think hard landscaping is already prohibited under the policy, isn't it?
Through the Mayor, technically the wording of the condition says it's strongly discouraged. So not necessarily
Not
prohibited. Roughly, I'm paraphrasing. When Councillor Turnbull spoke to us earlier on, the request was that she would like to make it more forceful.
So can I just clarify though, people have to put in an application to make a change to their verge, so can't we just reject it? If it's strongly, I'm saying like we have a right to say no, but you can't do that anyways.
Through the Mayor, that's correct, and 99 times out of 100 that will probably be rejected. There may be a circumstance that is not the case, but I can't give you that example.
Can I ask another question? It's probably not related to the amendment. Does that matter? Okay, I'll hold out then.
Then I'll hold it.
I'll hold out.
Yeah, if it was a supplementary one, I would allow it, but...
Thank you, Mayor. Question, is the clarifying that hard landscaping, the definition, that also includes timber, or any structure to create boxes, like planter boxes around trees?
No. Well, I don't think either of those are the AstroTurf or putting in supergrass. That's already prohibited. But
raised timber. So
that's a garden bed which would still allow for moisture to
raised garden
flow
beds
through.
with timber, so that you could have timber, so as high as you like, around a tree, next to the footpath and across to the road, boxing and containing the bottom of the tree. For me, I think that's a tripping hazard. I'd just like to know whether, it sounds like it's not in the policy because everything has to be flat at ground level.
Through the Mayor, your assumption is correct. So those examples that you would provide for those would generally not be consistent with the policy, subject to us considering it all. The way we would read hard landscaping is non-pervious surfaces.
Now, Councillor Lep.
Thank you. I have a question also. In my days when I was a member of CAP, both, I spent a lot of time in areas that I don't live in, like Aldana and Skye and such like. It was very interesting, actually, because I very rarely go to those suburbs, and I did to do site visits. And in Aldana particularly, there are what I would call rather large boulders that are on the verge. Now, this particular amendment, to me, that you don't get harder landscaping than boulders. So, you know, this is an area that's actually quite hilly. People don't want their front yards actually disappearing down into the street. How does that operate, I guess?
Generally think, you know, that they're generally used as a retaining wall, but they are technically on a verge.
Yes.
Because there are, like, most of Aldana and Skye and Mount Osmond, there are no demarcations.
No.
Where there are no verges.
That's right, and I would
verges.
I would hate to then suddenly, you know, another council 10 years from now tells those people to move their boulders. Thanks very much. Take your big rocks and,
All right.
and so I won't actually support this for that reason.
Okay. We do need a seconder before we start any debate on this. Councillor Dawes, you're seconding. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor. Mr. Cannon, correct me otherwise. The intent is that this isn't designed to be retrospective. Is that correct?
Yeah, because there are instances I know in Aldana where they've got, yeah, so it won't be retrospective, no.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this amendment? Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. Question to administration. Obviously, this policy says hard surfaces are prohibited. And I suppose my question to administration is, would there be any times where a hard landscaping is warranted for whatever reason? Like the boulders, those sorts of examples.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the boulders wouldn't be captured by hard surface, I don't believe.
Why not? Because they're brown. No. Come on, leave it to the CEO to respond, please.
I think in this case, Madam Mayor, the CEO is out of his depth and he needs to refer to Mr. Cant.
Through the Mayor. The policy is already clear that raised installations within the verges are already prohibited. Okay, so rocks and boxes are already not allowed. I cannot think of a reason why you would allow a resident to change their verge with a non-pervious surface or a hard landscaping. I cannot think of a reason why you would do that, so I'm comfortable with the position that Council is willing to take.
Councillor David.
Just a question. What if instead of an all-right ban, we went with something like strongly discouraged or words to that effect?
That's what we've already got.
Would that cover most of the concerns of the chamber, do you reckon?
I think the point that Councillor Turnbull is making is that she would like it to be banned as opposed to strongly objected against. And I do understand the perspective from, if we're trying to ensure that as much moisture gets through to the soil, then putting in a plastic and gravel over the top is certainly going to be an impermeable surface that is not, they might think is attractive with white stones or green stones or whatever, but may not necessarily be very good for the environment. And I think that's the perspective. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Turnbull. Councillor Cornish.
I do have a question if I could, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm almost certain with our verge mowing policy that if a resident or ratepayer cannot maintain it, the council may put in dolomite as an alternative for the verge. And I wonder how that might interact with our hard services definite no here. And I know there's certainly a lot in my area that have got dolomite instead of lawn.
Dolomite still lets moisture in. Anyway, we'll get an answer from this. Mr. Cairns.
Through the Mayor, and now you're testing my knowledge of that particular policy, I believe that may have been a previous policy that was amended last time we looked at the verge maintenance programme through that service review. My understanding is we will normally reinstate that verge with what the surrounding landscaping might be at that case, but I don't believe we do dolomite as a current practice, but I will double check that and provide you an update tomorrow.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I'll speak to this. I'll speak to this amendment. I'm not going to vote for it for a couple of reasons. One is I'm concerned about Aldana and places like that that are built on high slopes, and I just think that in some instances you can't have one size fits all. The original motion and the policy itself gives our administration the opportunity to take this on a case-by-case basis. And I think that there are some instances, and in some places in Burnside, and I'm not talking about Rose Park, where gravel's okay. I'm not talking about gravel with plastic underneath it, I'm just talking about gravel. It's permeable, it's better than the block pavers that we've got. I think I'd rather have gravel on my street than what I've got, so on the footpaths obviously. So I just think that the original policy gives us the opportunity to have the flexibility to look at this on a case-by-case basis, and that's the one that I will move that should this motion fail.
Wait, move what?
Councillor David.
I actually think the policy is fine how it is. I mean, if you actually have a look, there's the policy, if you read it, talks about in 6.19 where practicable verge development shall not result in a net increase of impermeable material of more than 20% of the verge. And then you've got all the infrastructure that you need there to make a considered decision. And banning it outright, I don't think is the best way to go. There's also probably cases where you're looking at potentially altering driveways and how driveways interact with the verge. So they might put in an application where they want to have a bigger swing or a lesser swing, I imagine. I'm not sure how that fits into this in the impermeable material category as well. So I do believe if you go through the policy and you look at how the policy deals with this issue, I think it adequately is. And remember, it is a policy. So I think the administration need the discretion to be able to allow things where it's potentially rock hard surfaces and it's clay, and the residents trying to put in a rock garden and actually have moss or something like that. There's actually in Aldana, there's a particular spot exactly like that where they're trying to put in to beautify that verge where it's rock hard clay. They can't do anything. There won't ever be grass there. So actually having a rock garden or something like that would be a massive improvement on the aesthetics of the area. So I think that in circumstances like that, like on Aldana, what's it called, Rebecca Avenue, I believe it is, where the residents have been pushing for that hard. It's one of their community bids to do something like that on that area. I think it would be appropriate. So I think I don't for a second think that the CEO or any of his staff are going to be trying to destroy the leafy green character of our leafy green suburb. And so I think the current policy does what it needs to do. That's why we're supporting this amendment or any changes to try and deal with this issue, because I do believe it's adequately dealt with.
Councillor Hugh.
Sorry, I hate to Google during meetings, but I'm just wondering whether staff can confirm. We have, might be an old document online, but we have 70% of our verges being grass, 20% being bare or hard surfaces, and the remainder being developed verges. And I'm just wondering whether that, so we do have verges that are bare or hard surfaces within the community. So I appreciate we can't go back and retrospectively change that, but obviously there's a reason why those 20% are as they are. I don't know if that's, I think it is a question, but I'm just not sure. Didn't I elevate my voice?
Yes, please, Mr. Canning.
Through the Mayor, I believe that was the study that we took prior to the service review of the lawn mowing and the verge maintenance programme. I can't answer specifically why. There will be some verges that there's a reason, and it might be because it's not suitable growing conditions, or it just hasn't been attended to previously. But I can't give you the actual data of why they would be hard surfaces at this stage. It's more likely to, other than those that were dolomited in previous times, probably more likely to be compacted earth as opposed to anything else. And also, just to quickly go back to Councillor Cornish's question, because I have quickly checked, paragraph 41 in the report, page 252, specifically directs us to our requirements if an area becomes untidy in an eyesore. Now, we can terminate the 221 permit, remove the landscaping and replace it with a suitable material at our discretion, and that's considering the local streetscape at that time. But almost every time we would look to make sure it's a proper permeable surface.
Councillor Dawes.
A question to administration. We have got, under the conditions, number 26 on page 251, it talks about stepping stones and so forth, which is probably what Councillor Levin's talking about at Aldana. By this amendment, which I've seconded, where it says hard landscaping is prohibited, do you understand that to mean that boulders and stepping stones will not be allowed, so therefore condition 26 is removed?
Through Madam Mayor, I will refer to Mr. Cann.
I don't know.
Because you can't.
Place up there, absolutely, unless there's some really lovely areas as well, beautiful,
So even though
so you get the whole house, you set the pool and all that stuff. But no, if you're doing the resort, yeah, definitely the Sheraton.
Yes. Because they could then go and say, oh, we know we've got 15 houses, we're going to have a rolling program where we work with the owner to remove that.
They've got the Sunday markets, you know, which is sort of,
I won't muddy it.
artistic and sort of,
Otherwise
I don't know, it's sort of like Sterling markets. Sterling markets, sort of, it gives me that sort of feel that obviously you're in a much warmer climate. But you know, it's very eclectic and stuff, so it's quite lovely. Yeah. No.
I'm going to draft something.
Summer holidays.
Yeah.
Informal session.
That one.
What do we call it when we go informal? Informal. Shane, that's hilarious.
Thank you. Thank you for Thank you for the opportunity to clarify that, Madam Mayor. So, with reference to the question, does the reference to hard landscaping negate point 26? The way I'm interpreting it is no, it doesn't. I believe the two can exist in the context that 26 is particularly referencing steeper terrain, and I think we need to have that provision in there for those circumstances such that Councillor Davis alluded to earlier. But in terms of hard landscaping, referring to Councillor Turnbull's example, I think we would go and have a conversation with that resident and talk to them about the fact that currently they have created an impermeable setup by putting the plastic sheet underneath, and that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's not
I was just suggesting that, the gravel itself is not impermeable, but the way they've installed it is impermeable, putting that plastic sheet underneath.
I'd say perhaps it's going to need a definition added to this policy of what hard landscaping actually is to make it clearer for people to interpret.
Through you, Madam Mayor, with the fear of perhaps confusing the issue, hard landscaping is about having an impermeable surface.
Can we change that?
And the reference to rocks, it would be impermeable if the whole verge was one singular rock.
Yes, exactly.
Multiple rocks, it's permeable. It's permeable. Yeah.
Wait, so what's hard landscaping?
An impermeable surface.
So, so if you put a whole bunch of rocks and gravel, that's fine for this. So what does this do?
Can we change hard?
You can't have one rock. Is that what this does?
Yeah.
So this does nothing. This is not good.
You can't have a concrete wall. Right, now we've got a number of people who are on the line. So first of all, it's Councillor Hughes.
Look, before the CEO had confirmed perhaps that clarification, I thought the policy probably did what it was being asked to do without necessarily this amendment. What I do have concerns about, I guess, is when there's like one or two specific things that people see that then we think we need to change the whole policy. And I guess, you know, I'm spoken to Councillor Davey, I think there's an opportunity to bring something back about maybe we do an audit of verges that don't comply with our policy and then make a plan around how we go and manage that. So AstroTurf, you know, historically people have installed that, and I actually think we need to go back and have a look at that. So look, I'm happy to support the amendment because I think the staff are going to work to make sure that it fits in with what essentially they've said in the discussion around discouraging things. So I'm happy to support that. But I do think I think there's some work that we can do in general around the wider thing. And I do always just get a little bit concerned when we make a whole change to a policy based on one individual scenario, but the staff have given me comfort that will work out in this situation. But I think we need to take a holistic approach when we look at the policies rather than just necessarily thinking about one thing. But I understand Councillor Turnbull's concerns, so I'm happy to support the amendment.
Councillor Davey.
I was going to speak in support of this. So I can't talk to the amendment. Oh.
Can I just double check,
can all go
please?
home.
That's correct, isn't it? Yep, that's correct. So now it's Councillor Davis.
So what does this do? Long and short, after all those questions.
Is that a question or is that a statement? Is that rhetorical?
What does this do? It's not a statement. No.
Through the Mayor, I believe it uses stronger language in the policy that still meets the intent of what the officer's policy or recommendation was at that stage.
Right, I have no one on my. Did you wish to speak? No, I have no one else on my screen. So the amendment needs to be put. So I'm putting the amendment now. Those in favour of the amendment. Those against the amendment is carried. So the amendment now becomes the motion. Is anyone left to speak? Please.
There's a lot, and I've got a question.
Yeah, I'll get your question in a minute, but I'm just checking, because I haven't kept a record of through the two as to who's spoken. There've been lots and lots of questions, like at least 20.
Endless.
Is there anyone else left to speak? I might as well ask up front. I know Councillor Hugh was telling me he is.
Then quick, Paul, make the motion before. It's not hard at all.
I don't think there's anyone to second it.
No, I haven't spoken.
Henschke, Cornish and Hubel and Carbone. So we've got Henschke, Cornish, Hubel, Carbone, Piggott, or yes or not? Yes, okay. So there are 5. Do any of you wish to speak? You wish to speak? Okay, Councillor Henschke wishes to speak. Ah, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was trying to preempt it by asking is
Yeah.
there anyone? So
Oh, good.
I realised you already had your name.
I did.
Cornish. Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, and I'll first ask a question of the administration if I can. Specifically, I note on page, and let me get it again, page 251, item number 27, under materials, we say all materials must be consistent with the council's streetscape guide, which I've just gone through, and it lists a whole lot of block pavers that we need to actually do. And the reason I bring this up is I've been having very long ongoing dialogue with a resident in my area who's very annoyed with developers building their houses, and they go and put their own crossover that doesn't match our pavers. From very long ongoing conversations with Mr. Cooper, legally they can do that because the crossover, we have to permit them a crossover our land to the road to their property, and they can do it as long as it meets our standards. But it doesn't really go down to materials previously. So can I clarify that now we are setting that you have to use only these materials that we're actually listing in our streetscape guide, rather than them doing concrete or anything like that? You have to use these block pavers. I'd love that understood, and I'm holding this until I have a follow-up. Yeah, they're crossover.
Through the mayor, and I may be corrected if I'm incorrect here, I don't believe this policy covers crossovers because they are now considered through the Planning Development Act process. So this policy is not consistent with crossovers which you are referring to.
No, I'm not cross about. I just need that clarity of it. I suppose then my next question is, why do we even have the materials section in here if we're now no longer allowing any hard services such as these things, and it pretty much only just lists what block pavers you're allowed to use?
Through the mayor, the previous position of the policy was that there should be no increase of more than 20% of non-permeable surfaces. That was the policy position, which would include potential of block paving and the like. If that's removed, that section can be removed. So if we proceed the way that this motion is going, I would recommend that number 27 is removed, which we can do because that's as part of the conditions, not as part of the policy.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. A question following on from that excellent point from Councillor Cornish was our streetscape guide was last revised in 2018, and with the new planning and design code, when can we revise our streetscape guide to specifically address our new zones, because this all relates to heritage conservation areas, and now we have a new city master plan, etc. Can we be reviewing this streetscape guide so it aligns with the new look for Burnside?
Through the Mayor, I'm just checking the streetscape guide just now to see whether or not there was actually a review period as part of that. However, it's a document that's been approved and endorsed by Council. If Council wish that to be reviewed at any time, they can certainly bring that motion to the floor.
Review.
We can certainly do that. As part of the process of any new Council term, the administration will review all of those documents and determine what needs to be presented to the new Council as well, with respect to refreshing and updating. So that might be a suite of the documents that we do present to the new Council. However, at any time, Council can bring a motion to the floor to revise any document at that stage.
So just clarifying, I raise it because I thought that it'd be part of the city master plan.
Through the city master plan is a significantly high-level document, and the streetscape guide
Eventually.
is at a street level.
Yeah. So we could eventually get there through the process there. Thank you for clarifying that. So my question that I planned for this point was, in the policy, we say that we're not residents have to basically carry their own insurance for any changes they make on the verge. So if someone hurts themselves because they've done some landscaping, then the liability is on the owner of the property. So the works are part of a permit that they would have got. So does that permit become part of the Form 1 that the new buyer will have before them, so they know they have to make sure their insurance covers these things they've done on the verge? Rockeries and pathways and etc., boulders. Thank you.
Through the Mayor, as part of my research tonight, I didn't actually go to the Real Estate Act, so I apologise for that, but to be honest, I'm not sure. So I'll take that on notice, and I'll certainly get back to you on that.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I've got a follow-up question, actually, from what Councillor Cornish said and the response about block paving not being 20% more. And that was in a previous verge policy. And perhaps we ought to think about keeping it in this verge policy, because that may well give us the capacity, don't you think, possibly, of stopping one driveway becoming two all of a sudden, because that's certainly more than 20%. Do you think? Do you think there's something in that, folks, gents?
This policy, it's in. The one we're looking at.
Madam Mayor, I might just refer that to Mr. Cant.
Through the Mayor, I believe the number of crossovers or the width of a crossover is covered within either the PID Act or the traffic management policy, where it considers the appropriate width of those crossovers. Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Piggott.
Could I move that the motion be put?
Sorry? I haven't got my phone. What's that?
That was carried.
Yeah.
Now we put
Oh, now we've got to put the motion. Right. Sorry, that was the amended motion. So now the original motion, or the motion. So I will put the motion now. Those in favour? Those against? I'll still hooray. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move my slight amendment, which reads that Council 1 adopts the proposed public art policy with an amendment to the artwork assessment panel at 8.2.4 to include a public art expert, for example from South Australian School of Art, University of SA, or other expertise as a representative of community interest. And 2, establishes a public art reserve fund with an annual allocation of $100,000 commencing in the 2023-24 financial year. It's fabulous to see this policy finally reach the stage where we're finalising it. Thank you to the vision and efforts of Farley Taylor and her team. We only moved this 6 months ago, so there's been a huge amount of work done to pull all this together, research it and pull it together and to bring it to us tonight. It's designed, as everybody knows, to benefit and enrich our community and the wider community by ensuring quality public art is installed from time to time and resourced out of a public art reserve fund. This is anticipated to include murals, sculptural works, artworks, and contribute to capital development projects. The reason I've requested inclusion of a public art expert is as a result of lobbying I've received since this was published from someone who knows all about art, who said that while we have suggested we have a community interest section, that it is advisable to have someone who does know about art, especially if we're allocating about $100,000 up to a public artwork. It's consistent with what the Adelaide City Council does in their public art policy. And so it's to give someone with a background in public art or curating the ability to help give a perspective, a really informed art perspective to our assessment panel. So this is understood to be best practice. So I think it's good governance when we're investing up to $100,000 in a public artwork. So I would imagine that they would just be allocated sitting fees for this sort of a work on the panel. But I think it's a great idea in terms of that expertise that I think would really bring a good perspective to any artworks we're thinking of buying or commissioning in Burnside. So I hope you'll support this.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'll reserve my right to speak, but I do just have a question for the mover, just a suggestion, if they are willing, where there are examples of a source of a public art expert that we actually list, and this might just be virtue signalling, but putting the Australian Central School of Art, which is actually within the city of Burnside there, just might be a nice nod in terms of the public facing. Anyway, I'll reserve my right to speak, but that's just a suggestion.
I'm in the South Australian Central School of Art, so...
You've got the wrong name in there.
Yes, I've got the wrong name, so...
It's the Australian Central School of Art, AXA, yeah.
I'm happy to know that, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll reserve my right to speak.
It's the Adelaide Central School of Art.
Adelaide Central School of Art, thank you. Fabulous. Wonderful committee work.
Councillor Hughes.
I just have a question. Sorry, I'm just reading part one. I'm not sure if this is something that the administration can offer based on their interpretation, but maybe Councillor Davey can sum up. Does this 2.4 then replace the representative of community interest? Because it's just not. Did that person can only then be a person who has art knowledge?
While they're thinking about the answer, I think the way I read it and what happened with the police involvement for the Constable Hyde Gardens was that the community representative was actually the South Australian Police Historical Society, which was the group that were supporting the project, and hence they should be involved in the decision making, as they were. All right.
I'll just read 8.2. The artwork assessment panel will include, but is not limited to, relevant council staff, the mayor and ward councillors, a proponent of the public art project, so e.g. the community organisation, developer or council staff, which I would imagine includes your example of the police, and then the next heading is a representative of the community of interest, and that's where I put specialised art expertise.
Can I just raise the question, isn't it covered potentially that anyone else could be recruited to this panel anyway? The first opening line that you just read. I haven't got the page in front of me.
Relevant council staff.
I thought the first line wasn't relevant to council staff. Oh, okay, sorry. All right.
So, through Madam Mayor, I think you're referring to the 8.2, the opening line is the artwork assessment panel will include, but is not limited to.
Correct, that's what I meant, but not limited to. So if there were a piece of artwork that was significant, and particularly if it was up around the $100,000, there may be some reason to call in an expert, but it could be someone from the museum, could be someone from the art gallery, could be someone from the Department of Environment, which goes beyond those particular groups that you've mentioned there. That's all I'm thinking about. But depending on the type of... Yeah, but that's not what you're saying on one hand is a specialist, and then on the other hand anyone else who's a representative of community interest. And
Madam
okay.
Mayor.
Anyway, I'll leave it.
If I may suggest an option to get through the impasse, if we were to leave 8.2.4, because I think that is relevant, and add an 8.2.5 to take in your points for consideration, Councillor David? Yes. I'm certainly comfortable with that approach.
So make that, so that to, an amendment to the artwork assessment panel to become 8.2.5.
I just wonder if we could not consider this as an option. I'm not trying to persuade or sway the debate, but I think that the council would be always in a position to bring in an expert from whatever field of expertise was required to make an independent judgment or an evaluation of any piece of artwork that was proposed. As we probably could have with the Constable Hyde situation, where if we were in doubt or we had not disagreed, as it turned out, we all agreed, but if it had been some disagreement, at that point, surely it would be up to that committee to bring in someone to advise that committee or provide a different perspective. No, and I appreciate that, but I'm just...
Because this is quality public art best practice, so therefore we want, in my mind, someone who is, we've got this whole body of expertise who are at that Central School of Art, uni, let's say lecturers or other, the museum.
I just would rather see it much broader without specifying particular places.
Why wouldn't you say adopts a proposed with the addition of 8.25 to include public art expert, full stop?
I think a relevant public art.
Just a public,
Public art expert, yes.
full stop.
Maybe you put relevant public art expert, because it could come from a range of different people.
Policy on their own.
Yes, not good, is it? Exactly.
When you say not an amendment, but to include with the inclusion.
Thank you.
So you actually have the first one. Are you seconding this, Councillor Henschke?
I thought...
Oh, sorry, Councillor Hubel, you did second it, didn't you? Sorry, so now you can speak then, Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Davey, for this amendment. I felt the same when I read the policy the last time tonight, and I was just a little bit uncomfortable, but it wasn't specific in that aspect, because we do need to ensure that any artwork we invest in comes from a professional artist, and the National Association of Visual Arts, NAVA, is the peak body which registers. If you want to know if an artist is a professional artist, NAVA will ensure that is a professional artist through their membership, etc. And they have a code of practice, professional practice in Australia. It becomes very important as we work through our reconciliation action planning at the moment. We have to be very careful that we produce public art that is respectful. I am a bit uncomfortable. Yeah. Yes. And that's what I was going to next. Thank you, Mayor. That was my next point, was in the officer's paper. It pulls out that, I just got to refer to it. Paragraph 21 in the officer's report says First Nations artwork will be managed through the City of Burnside's Reconciliation Action Plan related advisory group. However, will still be subject to the public art policies guidelines. I just also think that we don't, we don't treat these First Nations artwork as separate to our public art policy. They're not an other, and they are, I read the public art policy as being all art from First Nations or any other artists. So that's all I wanted to say, and I thank Councillor Davey for this amendment. Yes, it is very, very important that we do seek the expertise there. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
I've got a question, if I may. Given that we've been talking about community consultation all night, what community consultation have we done to determine whether ratepayers want to fork out another $100,000 a year on public art?
Through Madam Mayor, if we can refer that to Ms Taylor.
Through the Mayor, if the amendment stands, particularly with the paper, it's looking at the $100,000 will be allocated in the next financial year, so it'll be undertaken through the draft budget and business plan process consultation through this time next year.
So if it's not clear to you, councillor, it will be out for consultation and we will get the feedback through that plan.
Surely we should get consultation before we make decisions.
Well, I can say that there have been a number of representations. No, more than one. There have been a number of... No, I didn't say deputations. A number of representatives who've come to me or come to the council staff concerned about the additional artwork and comparing us to Norwood, Payneham, St Peters, for example, which has a very strong public art policy and has had for many years. No, but you've just been told the consultation is going to go out. Right, so now Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I've actually got a question about this. When you go to page 266 and you look at 8.4 and 8.5, I'm not clear about when a recommendation would come back to council. I would want a recommendation to come back to council if we were spending $100,000, but my reading of this is up to $100,000 it won't come back to council. It's only more than that. Can you clarify that for me, please?
Through Madam Mayor, if we can refer that to Ms Taylor.
Through the Mayor, feedback provided through the public art workshop that we had with council members indicated that whilst council wanted to be involved in higher level decisions, they didn't want to be, because of the, I guess, the diversity of who liked what through that, I guess, scenario planning. This was built in through that feedback because some of the public artwork will be on a much smaller scale. We might do 3 or 4 smaller things, and therefore the ward councillors and the mayor, and I would certainly bring it back to council as an info doc, but so that was sort of the feedback that was indicated.
I'll speak to it now if I can. I have real reservations about that. Firstly, I don't believe that any halfway decent public art is going to cost less than $100,000, unless, of course, you're talking about knitting sleeves for trees or doing stobie poles, which isn't what I would call art. So I have real problems with the mayor and a couple of ward councillors and a historical person, a community representative and an expert making a decision for $100,000 potentially on our behalf. I don't think that's a good idea. And I don't want them to make a decision for $5,000 because I think something worth $5,000 isn't something I want in my city, quite frankly. So I've got real problems with that. I won't support this policy at all.
Can I just ask a question? How much did the Constable Hyde end up costing us? Was it about 30,000 or 60,000?
Through the Mayor, I believe it was $30,000.
And that was decided by 4 people, and it was brought to council, and I don't think there was any disapproval.
The budget was brought to council.
The budget, not the actual artwork. Yeah, the artwork was decided by Councillor Hughes, Councillor Davey, myself, and the gentleman from the Police Historical Society. Yeah. Councillor Cornish, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to support this. I think it's an okay initiative and let's get it done. Just a question regarding the actual fund itself. I'm presuming the allocation is an annual allocation of $100,000 and the fund could potentially grow if we don't spend it one particular year. So we've got the ability to spend it on a $300,000 instalment or a $500,000 war memorial or something that we might want. Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Councillor Turnbull.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I won't be supporting it. I think $100,000 a year is a large allocation. I'd rather see $100,000 spent on mowing the verges in our ward.
Councillor Davey.
Oh, sorry, no.
Sorry, you're on there. I assume no. Okay, Councillor Piggott.
No, thank you. Cheers.
Councillor Hughes.
I have a question. I perhaps should have got my head around this, but you know, when the ball starts rolling and then it triggers other things, so I apologise. Can I just clarify? So, public art itself, does that include, so say, and I'm just trying to understand, so is a contemporary art practitioner is presented in the public arena. So say we do like a really large mural somewhere that a school assists us with, that wouldn't fit under this, or it would? So, okay. It would?
It would. Did you wish to go on?
I'm just pondering. I'll come back.
Councillor Dawes.
I'm not really a public art man, so I'm listening to the debate, but I hate the way this is worded, to include 8.2.5 to include. I couldn't think of worse English. Can we just say to add 8.2.5 to include? You know, is that a simpler way of, you know, I've got to seek the permission of the mover and seconder, but let's make it simple, surely.
Councillor Jones.
No, I'm going to speak. I'm not voting for this. This is policy on the fly. The council is $20 million in debt. We've just put forward a 3.5% rate increase, and then we're going to go out to our ratepayers seriously and say, we're going to spend $100,000 on public art without even consulting you. I mean, if we were going to put $100,000 a year aside for something additional, my vote would be to buy additional open space. But we haven't discussed that at all. We haven't discussed whether we should maintain verges, because some of them are pretty poor, and we're saving money by relying on people to do it themselves. I just think this is reckless spending, and I can't support it, and I'll be voting against it.
That was the last person on the screen. No, Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. I'll jump in now. Look, a couple of councillors have raised the idea of the money attached to this, and I guess my response to that would be, well, this was an initiative that Councillor Davey brought forward months and months ago, and quite a lot has happened to get us to this point. And with due respect to everyone in the chamber, everyone has the opportunity to put forward, hey, this is something I think we as a council should do. Get it voted on, get staff to work on it, develop it, it comes to us and we make a decision. So I think that this is a very worthwhile thing for us to be investing in. We all appreciate and consume art daily. Look, we're all pay attention to fashion and colour coordinating ourselves. We have an appreciation of the aesthetic in our architecture, in our public spaces. The art is important, and people brush it off as, oh, it's not, this is a waste of money. It's not a waste of money. It's integral to our well-being. And I think it is one of the most important, if not the most important thing as human beings that we do, that we create art for ourselves. It defines who we were pre-civilisation. So the idea of public open space becoming an art gallery, I've got an idea that we have sculpture exhibitions, much like sculpture at the sea, at a couple of places in Australia. Sculpture artists create work that fit in to the natural environment. We have beautiful natural environment. We can invite artists to come and do installations that fit into our greenscapes. We could even have sculptures on the verge. There's a crazy idea. Sorry, it was a throwback. I came up with that idea when we were talking about verges. But look, I think this is a really worthwhile undertaking. It's beautifying our area. That's important to residents. It's important to us as human beings. And it is worth the money, I think.
Councillor David?
There are 4 words to be included in a proposal if you want it thrown out. Complicated, lengthy, expensive and controversial. Controversial means that you might lose a few votes, but if you really want to get thrown out, you say it's courageous. And that means you'll lose an election. So every other policy that we put through, we actually go out to community consultation, right? So what we're actually committing ourselves is to do what the state government does, $1 million over 10 years, This is actually like, it is quite a substantial amount of money every single year in, year out. And, but it's also not. It's actually, in a percentage, it's what, 0.25% of our income. Not even, it's a very, very small fraction of our overall budget. And I think artwork plays a very, very important part. Every single other policy that we develop and we go out to, we normally go out to community consultation, particularly if it's a new thing. And I think that if we're looking to include a $100,000 budget on something like this, I can't see why we wouldn't put it to engage Burnside, get some feedback before we move on this policy to then forever include this in our council budget. So my proposal would be that we vote this down, but that we then actually put this policy to consultation and see then what the residents come back. That to me seems the most responsible thing to do. Put it out to our community, see if they're on board with it. Then I think this chamber can very confidently going forward. This has only came up, the motion that came up in March 2022. It's not unreasonable that we take a couple of extra months to put that on our website and go out. So I'd be proposing an alternative motion that this policy go to consultation and seek the view out of the community so that this council can move forward in confidence.
Councillor Piggott?
It was like a switch got flicked there, wasn't it? It was all just rolling along okay. We were messing about with the words, and then suddenly something come over the chamber. Shit, the sky's about to fall in if we do this policy. Suddenly we've got rivers of debt. That's bobbed up. That comes in occasionally, not always, but occasionally. Consultation, public consultation. This doesn't spend any money at all tonight, apart from the paper that it's going to be printed on when it comes out of the printer. What it does is actually establish an approach for public art. I cannot emulate Councillor Hubel to discuss as to why that is a good thing, but even I see that's a good thing, and I'm not so into the aesthetic, obviously. It is an important thing to do. We do see ourselves as City of Burnside residents that it's a nice place to live, and lots of things go into that. And actually, in fact, public art is something that I think we are behind the game on. The person who spoke to the Mayor about the City of Norwood, that, if you're comparing that bit, not necessarily on anything else, but on that bit, they do leave us wanting. And what this does is actually give us a policy that, if it gets through the budget process next year, and we all know how difficult the budget process is, but if it gets through that process, we're ready to go to actually spend it. We're spending all sorts of $100,000 here every day without consultation, let me tell you. We've got a city of $40 million going out in a year, and we don't consult on every $100,000. And so I think this is a key piece of policy that a city like Burnside should have, and that's all we're doing tonight. We think the policy's right. If the community agrees to put in $100,000, or they might even put in more next year when it goes out in the budget process. So I think we should stop sort of throwing rocks at this policy. A lot of work has been done. We did actually ask for it to be put together, and it's been put together well. It does work if the community says, yeah, use $100,000 of our 40 mil on public art this time next year, then we're ready to go. So I feel this should be voted up, not voted down.
Can I just, before Councillor Hughes speaks, can I just ask, there are a number of people who are not at the workshop in relation to this policy. Have you got a copy of what the other councils, local councils spend or currently on their public art policy, for the sake of those who are not aware?
So through the Mayor, there were some examples given, one being the War Memorial rings that are on Osmond Terrace for the City of Norwood. They're $200,000. The City of Unley just put in what they refer to as the Echo, which is in one of their open spaces. That was $200,000.
What I meant was the overall amount, like committed every year, rather than a
Apologies.
special piece.
Crikey. I've printed it off a bit small. I can't quite read it. I'll have to take that on notice. I'm so sorry. It's too small. I can't read it. Barry, can you read that?
Did you email it out afterwards?
That's 8,400 annually. That's City of Campbelltown.
So just City of Campbelltown, 8,400 annually.
That one is
City of Norwood St Peters,
1% of the capital works budget.
1% of their capital works budget, which, or 50,000, which is greater.
And City of Unley are $200,000 for the settlements.
And City of Unley, $200,000.
Now, Councillor Hughes.
I didn't have any major issues with policy. I'm not as artistically aware as perhaps Councillor Davey and Councillor Hubel. Don't have much artwork hanging around my house. But I guess what I do, I'm just not 100% comfortable with the 8.2.5 being added, because if we are saying that artwork could potentially be a school mural, are we going to go and get a art representative to come and be part of that assessment panel? For something that could be $5,000 that we're just putting, like it just, I think it could be covered off, because then you're locking into that, and it could have been covered off under 8.2.4, representative of the community interests. I sometimes struggle when we try to make changes on the evening without having the time to step through the process. So it might not be a bad idea, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying I'm not necessarily on board, so perhaps if someone could convince me. But overall, the policy, you know, it probably sets out what we set to do. I think similar to what Councillor Piggott's saying, we're not committing to actually spending any money. We're just saying we should make an allocation in a budget, and that will go out as part of our budget process next year. And for those of us who aren't sitting at the table next year, we'll have the opportunity to respond as members of the community, whether we agree or disagree with that. Yeah, it's probably just sums up where I sit. But I just think that 8.2 assessment panel has the flexibility to add extra specialists in. And I'm not sure, I'm just not sure in my mind whether every single piece of artwork that we approve would need that level of specialist if it's just a small piece of art. You know, it might be some sticks, you know, the painted sticks that are in Penfold. You know, do we? So I just can't quite get my head around at this point in time the inclusion. That's, yeah, I'm happy to be convinced otherwise over the course of the next 10 minutes.
I have no one on the screen, so I'm inclined to go now back to Councillor Davey, because I'm also aware of the time and we'll be seeking extra time.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for their fantastic input. I'll just remind you what we decided on 26th of October last year, that Council considers that high quality public art enriches the city, making it a more attractive place to live, work and visit, and reflects city pride and the cultural diversity of our city. We requested that the report be brought to Council by the end of February, which it was, and as a result, a draft City of Burnside public art policy has been developed, which we have before us tonight. Recommendations for a possible funding allocation in the annual budget, possibly with the establishment of a reserve fund. We have that for the next financial year. Recommendations for acquisition of artworks, preservation of existing works, recognition of Ghana art, consideration of grants. All of that has been made, the capacity of that is in this policy. So we have been given what we have asked for. We didn't consider whether we needed to release it for public comment, I acknowledge that. It's been out in the public domain for nearly a week now. I've had public comment on it and I've therefore made the amendment tonight. If people think we need to release it for public comment, fine, but we're not asking for the money in this financial year. We're actually asking for it to a start in the 2023-24 financial year. I'm happy that we're aiming for best practice. We've made provision for an appropriate artwork assessment panel. We're leaving it to the staff to determine recommendations as to when this would be established and the amounts of art. And it's my understanding that no art will be installed that we don't approve of. So I think this gives our staff the capacity to work within this policy and deliver to us in council decisions that we might need that are to be made in the best interests of our community. So I think will be an asset, and I hope that you'll support this tonight.
I had to put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? I think that was 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, well, I have the casting vote, and I'm going to be in favour of it, because I certainly believe that it is essential. And let's face it, the next council could just have to review the policy anyway, and if they don't like it, they can throw it out. Hopefully they don't, but that's what. Okay, so it's Councillor Henschke, Cornish, Davey, Piggott, Dawes, and Hubel, and Mayor Monso. And against, Councillor Hughes, Davis, Lemon, Carbone, Turnbull, and Jones. Thank you. And I think that is the finish. Unless there is something urgent anyone wishes to report. Because we have 5 minutes, that's about it. Just go to the end. No motions on notice, no urgent. We've got answers to questions on notice. Urgent or other business? No, we've done that already. Did that at the beginning. Right. No confidential items, no urgent or other business, so I will declare the meeting closed at 10:20. And thank you very much for your attendance.